Welcome to another episode of Don't Call It Small. I'm your host, Natasha Foreman. If you don't know me and you have no clue what this podcast is all about, let me share a bit. I'm a lead management consultant at Foreman & Associates, LLC, where we provide consulting and professional development services. And Don't Call It Small is where we talk all things business, share tips and news that you can use, and highlight the people and ideas behind the products and services that we buy. To learn more about our team, please visit foremanllc.com. That's FOREMANLLC.com. Hey everyone. It's good to be back with you for episode 73. Goodness, can you believe it? Last week, we talked about those of you that may say that you don't have competition. Hopefully that episode helped to enlighten you on embracing competition, but not obsessing over it negatively. And we're going to look, there was a listener who shared about how to be a better manager leader. Those of you that know me and you've read some of the things that I've written, or you've taken a class with me, or you're a client, past or present, you know that I talk about manager leaders, because being a manager doesn't make you a leader. And it's important that you understand what it involves and what leadership requires. And being a great leader is not just because you have a title. And we have to really look at what we're creating and what we're emulating. So there is a quote from Donald McGannon that says, leadership is an action, not a position. And this is something that, I strongly underline, because a lot of times we say, oh, the leadership of your organization. And they're looking specifically at a position, at a title. And we see there are some folks that just really are not leaders. So we have to really focus on that. It's an action. So let's just dive right in, shall we? You want to know how to be a better manager leader. And I'll say this. You have to first want to start. The fact that someone's even posed this question indicates that they're on the right course, right? They're right where they need to be in regards to, and I say it, that you have to want to be better and know you're not the best. You have to know that you're in the ways in which that you want to improve. There has to be that self-awareness. And I think that oftentimes people are not really conscientious of their limitations and the ways that they can do better. So the fact that someone is in that frame of mind and understanding is a good place to be. As I've mentioned before, when we did the conversation about mentors, coaches, and consultants in episode 71, it's important that you build around you an advisory team, a board of mentors and advisors that can help guide you and help you in areas of your strength and address your weaknesses and hold you accountable. It doesn't have to be a formal type of, infrastructure or system, but it's just people that you can call on. Now, let's be clear. You're not having the yes people, right? So I don't want you recruiting yes people organization-wide, and you don't want to recruit yes people on your advisory board. You need iron to sharpen you. You need people that'll tell you no. You'll need people that, will hold you accountable. When you have yes people, when you're recruiting yes people to be part of your team, they won't tell you that you're naked. They're not going to tell the emperor that he doesn't have clothes on. They'll just talk about you behind your back. They'll just sabotage your efforts. They'll have these microaggressions that just will build up and build up and build up. They will passively aggressively tear you apart from inside out. You don't want yes people. Now, granted, you don't want people who are always trying to be defiant. Of course not. You don't want it somewhere where you feel like they are the saboteurs, right? They are in place to destroy. But you do want people that could sit back and say, okay, that way is not feasible at this point. We'd have to do steps 1 and 2 to make that possible. So do you give us permission to pursue steps 1 and 2 so that we can get to that? See, that's not a can't or impossible approach. That's telling you what can be done based on the resources that are available to you to be able to achieve that. So that's the reason why you can have a strategic goal that is not feasible to implement immediately, right? You want to go to Mars tomorrow. Okay, that's not feasible. When can we possibly go there? Well, let's do whatever steps tactically and operationally over time that will help us get to that point so that we can fulfill that. If that's the mission, if that's where we're ultimately going to be, the mission is that we're going to, have, residences and operations on Mars. And so the strategic plan is to get there by X, Y, and Z. What are we going to have to back into to make that happen? And so that's the reason why you don't want yes people on your advisory team, nor do you want them as part of your organization. You need people that have the vision, that are risk takers, that will bring answers and solutions to problems and questions. They're not the ones who just want to always tell you what you want to hear. That doesn't get you anywhere. As I have mentioned, and I'll keep mentioning, the importance of doing a SWOT analysis on yourself, right? I mean, we sit back and of course we may focus on our weaknesses. I think a lot of us will look at our strengths and our weaknesses, but how many of us are really sitting back and saying, okay, how can I leverage this to my benefit? And what are some of the opportunities out there that I'm not thinking about? What are some of the potential threats? What are some of the things that I'm not paying attention to that could potentially hinder my plans, my growth, whatever goals that I'm pursuing? Am I possibly hindering my business? In what ways am I standing in the way of my business? In what ways am I standing in the way of my team? And so when you do a SWOT analysis on yourself, you can look at what you are bringing to your team, what you are, in what ways you're hindering your team that you need to improve, get, tossed to the side, whatever you need to do. And then, of course, sharing this with your team. You need to be able to have that level of vulnerability and transparency so that your team knows where you're coming from. And the thing is that, a lot of times managers have a tendency of feeling like the team needs to adapt to them, when in actuality, a great leader adapts to their team. You're learning about them. You're learning what motivates them. You're learning what their fears are. You're learning what their strengths and weaknesses are. You're learning so much about them and how to get into their minds and their hearts in order to get them to do the impossible, the unimaginable, right? So by you sharing your SWOT, they then get to see within you so that they can also say, okay, in what ways can I help to support that? That is where you want to be able to be in a position where your team wants to support you in what you're pursuing versus you dragging them and forcing them to do it. Like I said, you'll have folks that'll sabotage from within, so you don't want that. And then, of course, you want to have that SWOT where your individual team members are creating their SWOTs on themselves, and you're reviewing this with them individually. And then you compile all those results into a team SWOT that is then shared team-wide so that you can see collectively the strengths and the weaknesses that the team has, the various opportunities that the team can seize, the various threats that the team needs to be aware of, not obsessed over, not fearful of, not, oh my goodness, and burying your head in the sand because of it, but understanding it's there and how can we strategically work at eliminating those threats, right? How can we play chess and not play, Connect Four, as I've always said. And then, excuse me, something else that it's really important is that I think a lot of times people you take on these positions, these titles, whether, you're a manager, supervisor, VP, a chief, whatever title you have. Sometimes you think that with that position, you no longer are supposed to be listening to people, that people are supposed to be listening to you, when actually this is when you're supposed to listen even more. So you need to truly listen and put action behind your words. You need to truly tap in, because what people are saying to you, especially when you're looking at your front line, and they're the ones who are doing the work day in and day out. They're the ones who are facing the public, the customer base, the vendors day in and day out. They have their hands, their fingers are on the pulse. They know, they see it, they smell it. Now, they may not be fully empowered and equipped to address things, and that's where management needs to step into play. It's your responsibility to empower them, to educate them, to uplift them. But while that growth is taking place, you need to listen to what they're saying and then work with them in order to bring about the positive change that is needed. So you have to put action behind your words. And that requires a level of emotional intelligence. You have to develop a stronger emotional intelligence to connect with people. As I've said before, like everything is about relationships. All of our interactions on this planet and even beyond, right, as we take this intergalactic space travel, will be about relationships and how those relationships are nurtured and how they're, molded. And the thing is that this requires a strong amount of emotional intelligence in order to connect heart to heart, to be able to sympathize, to empathize, to relate, to consider someone else's perspective, to see through their lens, and to then be able to honestly and respectfully and in a dignified way apply that to whatever circumstances before you. With all of this, as I started this conversation, we have to really work on being humble and self-aware. And this is something that I think is constantly reminded of us and to us, because the ways in which we will stumble. When we start stumbling, and there's usually stumbling tied to ethical decisions, these moral dilemmas that we face, and when we end up having big head syndrome, or we end up facing greed and ego and pride, blah, 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 you notice all of a sudden we get blindsided by life. Well, that's because we needed to be humbled. That's because we were not self-aware. We were not cognizant of what was going on around us and within us. And that's the reason why we had to be resettled and realigned. That leads me to the very strong point that I underline, I'll highlight, I'll put little star stickers around to say, it ain't about you. It's about serving and leading them. It really is not about you. And the thing is that you are supposed to be looking for your replacement. You are supposed to be looking for other leaders. You are supposed to be nurturing and building leaders. So you need to get to know them. What are their personal and professional needs? How can you find ways to fulfill those needs? How can you support them so that while they're doing the work that they need to do for your organization, they're not distracted and double-minded and thinking about their personal needs that are not being fulfilled? And as I said, the willingness to be vulnerable. Be willing to be vulnerable and then do it. There's strength in that vulnerability. And I'm learning this more and more as the years go on. There's strength in being able to share, oh my goodness, I'm terrified about X, Y, and Z, but let's see, we're going to push through this. We have folks of different religious faith and beliefs. And, I'll share the example from time to time where, people have this, they romanticize, Jesus Christ as though he did not walk in fear, but he did. The times in which he asked the disciples, please, stay up and pray. I'm terrified. I'm scared about what's next. And the disciples kept falling asleep. He's like, oh, crap. Clearly, I'm going to have to do this by myself. You guys aren't worth a plum nickel, right? That's what my grandfather used to say. But there was the fear there, but he did it anyway. We can look at all the different examples throughout history and recently where people are there, you're facing that fear, but you do it anyway. And so the great leaders that we know of, right? The great leaders that we follow, the great leaders that we praise, the great leaders that we reflect upon, the great leaders that we choose to role model are the ones where they share in that vulnerability. And, as I teach college courses, I engage a lot with some of my students that are active duty in the military and some that are retired. And they all underline that point, that what brings them together within their units, within their teams, is their ability to be vulnerable, where they're able to share. When they have an understanding that this person is not just, there, just this other body, but that this person has a family that they're trying to get home to. Guess what? You're mindful of the decisions that you make, because the decisions you make may mean that person will get home or won't get home, right? And so that's the same type of mindset. That's the same type of openness that we need to have, where I think sometimes people feel like, oh, if I, share too much, then, familiarity breeds contempt. We'll talk about that. We're going to talk, I believe it's next week, we're going to be talking about sharing and oversharing in the workplace. Yes, there's certain things that you don't need to be sharing. Like there's some levels of your intimate life that I don't think that you need to be sharing. You don't need to share with anybody except for the person you're being intimate with. Okay, so we'll talk about that in a future episode. But your heart needs to be shared with your team, period. That's what helps to build that trust. And I've said it, but I'll keep saying it. Don't get big head syndrome because of your title, because of your position, because of your net worth, because of what your bank account says, because of the car you drive, because of the home you live in. Don't let your head get big. Big head syndrome means you are not humble. And big head syndrome will lead to a fall that is devastating and crushing in so many ways. So you have to really make sure you check. And that's the reason why having advisory people, having folks on your team who will call you out and hold you accountable, will call you out and say, oh, your head's getting a little big. Do we have any WD-40 to spray so that you can get through those front doors? Ooh, we may have to take you up the service elevator because you can't go through the regular elevator. Like you need some folks that can lovingly check you. And something that is key, something that is big for every person, whether they realize it or not, is consistency. Consistency. If you're flip-flopping and stuff, folks don't trust that. They're wondering what's going on with you. It's different when you're having to make moves, right? And you're having to pivot. That's different because you're adjusting to change. And sometimes change can be abrupt and sometimes it can have you do some wacky type of things. But the thing is that how are you behaving and how are you addressing the change? Is there a level of consistency with that? Is there consistency in the way in which you reward, in the way you punish, in the way you empower, right? Is there consistency where people are like, yeah, that's the person. If they were to talk about you to other people, would those other people say, oh yeah, that's Dan, or yes, that's Jackie, or they say, huh, that's not the same person, because you're inconsistent, because it seems like you got these multiple personalities that are operating independently of each other. So consistency is key. And we talked about the workplace inconsistencies that cause disruption and, uproot you from within. We spoke about that in a previous episode. Goodness, I think that was like, was that 68, 69? Let me look at let's see. Goodness, I don't know how long ago that was. It was 67. 67 was workplace inconsistencies. So just making sure that you are consistent in all the ways that, possible. And then just remembering this, as we talked about big head syndrome, and we talked about listening, and we've talked about how, you're talking, making sure that you remember this. And I'm going to say this in a way so that you can visualize it. Your team members, your coworkers, they don't have tails or branches. Be mindful of how you speak to them. They don't have tails. They're not dogs. They're not cats. They're not rats. They're not cows. They're not cattle. They're not horses. They're not to be ridden. They don't have branches. They're not trees. Don't climb on them. Okay? Now, I tell people to live their life like a tree, to be mindful of where you're rooted, to be mindful of the soil that you plant yourself in, to be willing to change and embrace that change and help encourage that change as a tree. But you are not to treat them like they're one. This is not where you turn around and you start carving in your initials and climbing all over them and pulling off the branches and pulling at the leaves, and you trying to build a tree house in them. Don't use them. Be mindful of how you talk to them, you speak with them, how you treat them. Those are human beings. Just like you. You are no better, no worse. They are no better, no worse. Period. So it's important that we do that. And sometimes we forget, especially the more, the higher up we are in an organization, the higher up we are in the food chain, the higher up in our rank within a family. You happen to be the eldest son, and so in that way you feel that you are entitled. No, you're not. So we have to be really crystal clear on that. And then learn to effectively delegate in a way that empowers and uplifts team members. And I mentioned the empowering and uplifting them earlier, but you have to find ways in which your delegation is, as I've shared in previous episodes about delegating, your focus is this. There's usually about 20% of the core tasks that you're doing daily that's generating the 80% of energy that keeps that business going, right? But oftentimes we're focused on 80% of the task that's only generating maybe 20% of what keeps that business going. Of that 80%, can you delegate that to other team members? Are you confident that they can do 80% of those tasks or 80% of a task without your overview, without your hand being, on the steering wheel? In that case, if that's the case, then you need to delegate. And I know that people struggle with it because you're like, oh my gosh, I have to spend the time to, work through the task with them in order for them to be able to come close to mastering it or mastering. And that's more time on my end. Yes, it is. It definitely is. It is. But if you're trying to reach that level of freedom that we all say we want, the only way to do that is to start to let go. Like, we have to start letting go. And I'm going to talk about it in a second, so I won't get ahead of myself. But you have to find ways that, how can I empower them and uplift them and to get them to the positions where they desire? Am I paying attention to where they say they want to develop and where they want to grow? I had a conversation with my sister, and she was talking about in her job interviews that she has a tendency of letting them know, like, I'm looking at not when, or she's talking about the culture of the organization. She is really looking at the personalities and whether or not these people are really nice, or are they just nice because they're in this interview mode. They're trying to, recruit and seduce and lure you into this position, but they're actually miserable there, or they actually don't want to be there, or whatever the case may be, right? And so she's looking at that. As she explained to one manager, is that I am with my coworkers longer than I am with my family. And so if I am spending more time in my day with you, I want to make sure that I'm in an environment that is rewarding, that is, it's pouring into me in a positive way, that I feel good about being there, that my team feels good about being there. And, there's an atmosphere and an energy that is uplifting. And so, you're like, you have to take that into consideration. Like, it makes sense. So if you hear someone say that, then, you have to be mindful of that. When you hear someone say in an interview at any point that they have a desire to, grow within the organization, like that's the most disappointing experience and disappointing example to hear is when people tell you in an interview that they have a desire to grow with an organization, but yet you're putting them in a position that that the culture within tends to hold folks in that position, that the only time they're not in that position is because of voluntary or involuntary turnover, right? They left by their own efforts because they quit or they were fired or unfortunately they passed away. So it's like, if someone's telling you, I have a desire to grow, you have to listen. And that just really underlines what I mentioned earlier about truly listening and putting action behind your words. And that is really key. And then, be intentional with your training, coaching, and mentoring. It should not be a passive. It should be an intentional effort that you're putting in, because the goal is to uplift. The goal is to build more and create more and mold more leaders. The goal is to find your replacement. If you're trying to go upward in the organization, you need to find someone who can replace you. If you're trying to free up your time so that you can spend less time day to day in your organization because it's your company, but you are trying to have freedom, then you have to be able to find the individuals that can replace your efforts, right? You have to be able to find the people that can handle the 100% of what you do. They can handle 80% of what you do so that you are freed up. And so you have to be intentional with training and coaching and mentoring. You should invest heavily in creating an ecosystem that new team members are assigned, whether voluntarily or meaning where people just volunteer to become a mentor or coach for them, or they are in agreement to be assigned to a new team member. So you can create one or two avenues where someone is then taking them under their wing, and for the first 90 days and beyond, maybe that, someone's with them for, X number of weeks, and then someone else helps come in and starts to coach or mentor them for the next 60 or 90 days, or however you create that type of system where that person is then building a relationship with these different people who are saying, we want to see you succeed. We want to see you thrive in this organization. We want you to be part of our team for as long as you can be. And so if you create that, it's intentionality behind it. It means that you truly do value and you truly do want them to be part of something bigger than all of you. And so that is really important. And then going back to the whole delegating but also tying this into the training, is consider recording yourself performing various tasks to help with training for delegation, etc. So I shared that with a client the other day, that, she struggles with delegating, and so she's so overwhelmed and she's going through a lot of things. And I says, well, here's something that I recommend doing. And this is something that I've been doing as I've been creating training videos for another client, is that if I am recording myself doing a task, performing a task, then at that point, whoever gets that video can see exactly how to perform the task. So it's just repetition of having them watch the video and repeat the task that they see until they're able to master it. That saves time in having to, do it over and over and over again and do it with new people. Record yourself doing it. It's like screen record yourself or set up your phone. It doesn't have to be fancy smancy, but you can turn around and record yourself and explain the process set those videos on a thumb drive or whatever, and or within your server and in the cloud, wherever you have it. And then that way you have it clearly, labeled as that. Here's the video on how I create this report. Here's the video on how I do this. Here's my, the process I use for sales. Here's the process I use for following up. Here's the process. It's like, there you go. You do it once and you don't have to do it again until you improve the process, until you improve your system. And you're like, you know what? I need to go back and I need to update that video. But that then covers all the scenarios, as if you were injured or you were ill, or you couldn't get back in town, or something happens, or you unfortunately you pass away. How can someone pick up the mantle? How can someone pick up the baton and keep running with it? If they already have videos, then there you go. So that's something I recommend. That's something that I think will be a valuable tool. And then lead in a way that your team doesn't feel your guidance, right? There shouldn't be a leash or harness or yoke. Like, it should be in a way where they feel as though it's their effort and not your effort making them do what they need to do, which reminds me of a quote from Lao Tzu that says, a leader is best when people barely know he exists. When his work is done, his aim fulfilled, they will say we did it ourselves. That is the beautiful touch of it. It reminds me of when you're being driven by a professional driver, by a limo driver or whatever. Those that are really good in driving, drive in such a way that you can't even feel the car stop. My dad used to always tell me that when he was teaching me how to drive. He said, I need you to learn how to do the Rolls Royce stop. And I'm like, what in the world is that? He said, it's being able to stop where the car doesn't jerk, it doesn't lurch, the passengers can't even tell you've stopped the vehicle. And so I learned how to stop a vehicle that way. It took a lot of practice, right? But the same mindset is in the way in which we can lead. And you can do it in a way where, once again, it's about empowering your team to the point where they feel as though it is their efforts. And it's not ego, it's none of that. It is, am I building and nurturing leaders? Or am I only focused on followers? It's just, that is the tangled web that you keep weaving, right? Where you keep thinking that people are to serve you. No. Your goal, what you should be focusing on, is how can I pour into them so they can replicate this and pour into others. So making sure that you're recognizing and rewarding people individually and collectively. And so, yes, there are team efforts and you focus on that team, but also understanding and recognizing if you had anyone who went above and beyond, that you recognize them individually as well, and doing so timely and fairly. And so it's doing the recognizing and rewarding timely and fairly, but also understanding that at times where there are punishments, right? At times where someone did something wrong, that you're also focusing on doing that in a timely and a fair manner. Don't discipline, 4 months later, end of year. Like, I always have issues with people that do year-end reviews, and you're punishing the team member at the end of the year for something they did in quarter 1 or quarter 2. No, you should have addressed that then. Like, no. You don't spank your child 2 weeks after they did something. Does that make sense? You don't put them on restriction a month after they did something. So you need to make sure that rewards as well as discipline are timely and that they're fair. How you do with one person needs to be done with someone else. Do not ever put yourself in a position where it seems to be a sense of favoritism, or it seems that you have it out for someone. And, back to communication, underlining communication. If you're focused on constantly asking for feedback and following up on feedback from team members, on various things like work policies and procedures and processes and functions and systems and rules and so on and so forth. This is so very valuable, because the thing is that you're engaging them and you're allowing their minds to work in a way where they can then turn around and think of all the ways that things can be improved upon. They can help to sit back and flush out what's, redundant, what's no longer significant, and in what ways that there's inconsistencies. And so constantly asking for that feedback, following up on it. There's one thing that some of the feedback that you get from employees in different workplaces is that, well, they have us do these stupid polls or surveys, but they don't ever seem to do anything about it. Like, so what's the use? You got to be able to follow up. And so that's key. And constantly requesting evaluations on how you could assist them better. So, I have a pet peeve about managers that do, monthly, quarterly, annual reviews, evaluations on their team members, but there's never an evaluation that's done on the manager. And that right there is a red flag for me. I want my team to always be able to evaluate me. My students evaluate me every class. Every class there's an evaluation. And that evaluation is then seen by, the higher ups in the college, in the university, right? The same is within my organization. As a business owner, my team members need to evaluate me. They need to tell me in the ways in which I am not doing a good job, or in the ways that I'm doing a great job, in the ways that I could support them better, in the ways in which I can, release, my hold on things, the way that I can delegate better, the way that I can, help them. And so that is really, really, really important, is that you have to get those evaluations. And the thing is this, no retaliation. When you get a bad evaluation, don't turn around and then and let that little kid in you come out and act a complete fool. I get bad evaluations, and how you want to define bad is that because it doesn't make you feel good. That's what it is. You didn't like that someone said something that you didn't like, so you look at it as a bad evaluation. But I receive bad evaluations every single semester. There's going to be a student who is not pleased by, their class, their grade, how they were graded. They weren't pleased by the structure. They weren't pleased because they were forced to go beyond their comfort zone. They weren't pleased because they couldn't slide by. They weren't pleased because they couldn't, bull crap their way through, or whatever the case may be. They weren't pleased that they were that they could not find a way to still get a passing grade, even though they hadn't attended class in several weeks and didn't do any work for several weeks. The same is true in the workplace. Folks are always going to try to find a loophole. And as I've said, that adults are overgrown children. So you have to be aware of that. So you need to interact. You need to engage with them. You need to connect heart to heart. You need to focus on creating more leaders, not followers. As I've said earlier, followers are like leaves. They're like leaves from the tree. They're going to blow off and they're going to crumble up and they're going to go on down the street. But leaders are the trees. This is in the positive way. When you have strong leaders, they are rooted, right? And the thing is that they grow, they're strong. They help bring, greatness into your organization. But when you have people that are followers, they are going to follow the next best. They're going to follow the next hippest, hoppest, whatever, right? So be mindful of that when you are building your team. And something about that always makes me think about in our interactions and our engagements with them. Don't violate their off hours and their off days. This is so annoying to me. And this is something I've really structured a lot, and I've made sure that I've checked myself on as well, is their office hours and days are to be enforced. Period. Free them from the work area at lunch. No, we're eating at our desk type of thing. Because the thing is that means they're always on. That means if they're at their desk, you can call on them. Everyone else can call on them to do something that's work related. No. So now if they happen to have an office, and I don't care if you guys end up having signs that are like, at lunch, don't bother me, that's put on the door, and then their door is locked. And no, You cannot mess with them during that time. I will say something else too. I'm so tired of you guys with these 30-minute lunches. Give me a break. I couldn't stand it when I was subjected to it. It takes me forever to be able to, especially if I didn't pack a lunch. And how many of us are packing lunches? Okay, but I then have to get out of my workspace. Maybe I go into the break area, which once again still feels like I'm in work mode. But let's say I go to my car. The time I'm sitting up here trying to do that, but most of us are leaving and having to go to a fast food restaurant or something. You're going at the same time that 30 other companies have released their employees from the plantation to go. And so then we're waiting, and then there's delays, and there's this and that. So maybe I get to scarf down something 5 to 10 minutes. I'm running back in. Like, stop. I mean, it's just you're doing too much. An hour, 2 hours. There we go. Come on. Like, come on. If you're paying $15 an hour, $20, what's $15? And I know that some folks are like, oh, you don't count our money. Okay. All I'm saying is that you get more. You'll get way more when you invest more into your team. You really will. You may not even be able to do any type of pay raises. But imagine making that adjustment to that lunch hour. That right there would be beneficial. Goodness gracious. So back to these off hours and off days. I'm going to stress this. No calls, texts, emails before or after hours. You're enforcing them to stay in work mode when they're supposed to be in off mode. And the thing is that even if you say in the email or the text, don't respond till tomorrow, there's this natural inclination to do so because they want to perform. They want to impress. They want to satisfy you. It's like the child with a parent. You want to get that pat on the head. So I'm going to say this. Don't send it. Hold off on it. Even if that means scheduling. And that's what I've been doing is I'll schedule an email to be released during the business hours the next day. It can wait. If it's that big of a deal, like what? Come on. Now, just because you're always on, and a lot of us are always on, we're always in on mode, doesn't mean jack. It doesn't. Don't force your commando mindset on your team. So you do you and you let them do be. You let them do them. You do you, you let them be. Period. Like, I get it. You want to, be all celebratory of your 90-hour work week, your 120-hour work week. I used to do the same thing. That does not mean I have to subject my team to that same mindset. You just stop. I'm going to say again, stop. Don't take advantage of salaried workers. That right there is something that we got to stop abusing them. Don't abuse the loophole. Okay? Don't abuse the loophole of salaried workers, knowing that you can now get 90 hours out of them, but you're only paying them for 60. Don't abuse that loophole. And we keep seeing it over and over and over again. You're getting this flat rate out of them, but yet you are abusing them. So don't do it. Don't. Stop. Don't take advantage of the loophole to avoid paying for full-time workers by converting jobs to part-time. I've spoken about this in previous episodes. Right? So you convert folks over to part-time, but you still give them full-time workloads and standards. That's malarkey. Pay more or make them full-time with full benefits. It's that simple. Stop making part-time jobs, but you're inflating them so much that they have full-time effort that they're putting into it. I have experienced that myself, and it is so disrespectful on so many ways. You are literally abusing your workforce, and you want them to smile and rejoice and brag about how great you are, and you're not. It's cruel. And you may not like what I'm about to say next, but stop the pimp game. You're pimping. You're pimping. You're pimping you're pimping. If you're doing any of these things, you're pimping. I'm just being honest. It's pimping. If you are one of these employees and you've experienced this, I know you're like, yes, amen. It's pimp game. It is pimp game 101. And that's why we have people experiencing burnout. So I want you guys to learn how to create the structure that would allow for the freedom that you and your workers, your co-workers desire. We've talked about it, right? We all want a sense of freedom. We all want to live our lives and not be working. Like, it's the cases that were we born just to be workers, right? That you were not supposed to explore and to enjoy this planet and all that is in it. No, that's not. It's not. We are not sitting. We were not born. And what was the purpose in going through K through 12 to learn about all these different things and the sciences and the arts and the history, and then you don't even get to go experience any of these things? Like, really? No. So help to create the structure that's going to allow for your freedom and theirs, that you're going to then be able to step away and take your breaks and eventually retire and rewire and enjoy life to its fullest, and they will be able to do the same. They are employed by you, but they don't work for you. I'm going to say that again. They are employed by you, but they don't work for you. They work for themselves, their family, to have a roof over their head, etc. That's what they're working for. That's what they're putting those hours in for. Knowing this, don't use these reasons against them. Don't guilt trip them or make them feel like their livelihood will be threatened because they don't comply. They don't do X, Y, and Z. Don't pimp them, folks. And as I mentioned earlier about retaliation, I need you guys to grow up. No retaliation. If you did wrong, own it. If you said something wrong, own it. If you know that you've created a toxic work environment, own it and fix it. Listen and follow up with action. But that action should not be retaliatory. Just because you don't like what someone said, just because you don't like a review, just because you don't like that someone is like, you're a jerk. I mean, are you a jerk? Yeah. Own it. That doesn't mean continue being a jerk. You're a jerk because somewhere in your psyche, in your smallness, because someone else made you feel insignificant, you now feel the only way for you to have any sense of significance and worth is to make other people feel small. You need to go and get help with that. Don't poo-poo on people because you feel poo-pooed on. So these are ways in which you can be a better manager, leader. You are responsible and should be held accountable for workplace culture and environment. If it's toxic, look in the mirror and then fix it. I don't care what level in the organization you're in. If you hold a management/leadership position, you are responsible and should be held accountable for that environment. Speak up. Speak up. Before we jump into shout outs, let me share a quote with you from John C. Maxwell. He says, the pessimist complains about the wind. The optimist expects it to change. The leader adjusts the sails. See? Following up with action. So let's do some shout outs, shall we? The first business, Little Things in Vintage, Jeanette and Felix Hernandez. They're in Wasco, California. It's a husband and wife dynamic duo. They've been in business for about 5 years now. They're known for unique Spanglish decor, mugs, and accessories, and laser cut wood designs. The assembly, painting, and framing is handmade. Jeanette creates them. Felix packs and ships them. They're prepped and ready to bring a smile to your face. They even handpick, wash, and give a second life to gently used clothing. They started doing that recently. They have an online store on Shopify, and I'll have all this information in the podcast description as well as our blog and social media. But it's little-things-vintage.myshopify.com. They're on Etsy. You can find them at Little Things Tiendita. And to stay connected, you can find them on Instagram. They've got I want to say it's 5 underscores combined, and it's the Little Things. And they take orders every 3 weeks or so. They post the date and time on their social media stories and feed as well as in their bio. So you can find them, like I said, on Instagram. It's a long underscore, the Little Things. Next up, shout out number 2 is Simply Mexicana. I absolutely love the work. They flores, frases y pintura, which means flowers, phrases, and painting. We have a Mexicana artist and dreamer, Karen Gonzalez from San Antonio, Texas. It's a Latino-owned business. Oh my goodness, folks. She makes absolutely beautiful sombreritos pintados. They're hand-painted hats and tote bags. The hats are purchased from a local family business, and they import all sombreros from Mexico where they're handmade. Beautiful. Karen paints them free-handed in her home studio. She started painting as a hobby in 2016. That's just a few years ago while she was in college. And then she started painting sombreros recently. When you see the work, I was up here thinking she's been doing this forever, at least 10 years. Is absolutely beautiful. She has different styles. She has fedora, explorer, round top, and then she has those in suede. She has straw hats. She has a restock that's coming soon. So you can visit her site, Simply Mexicana, TX, Simply Mexicana, TX.com. Facebook is Simply Mexicana, as well as Twitter and IG. I say Mexicana because that's how you say it in Spanish. So Simply Mexicana for the English speakers. Simply Mexicana at Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And as I said, their website is Simply Mexicana, TX for Texas.com. Amazing work. Shout out number 3 is Naja. It's Naja Tepi. It's either Naja or Naha. I'm sorry if I butchered your name. Naja Tepi. She's a maker of beautiful things. She's in Arcata, California. That's in Humboldt County. She does hand-painted art, pottery, utensil holders. She does bowls, mugs, trinket bowls, spoon rests, soap dishes, platters, plates, vases, and more. What is really beautiful is she designs with various flowers, poppies and violets and dahlias, and there's different colors and sizes. She even makes handmade jewelry made with sapphires and other gems, and then they're set in hand-stamped sterling silver. Her studio is open Fridays and Saturdays from 12 to 4 p.m. She's located at 824 L Street in Arcata, California. The website is najatepe.etsy.com. That's Naja Tepe at etsy.com. Beautiful work. Number 4, last but not least, is Melissa Jones. And she has It's Just Me by Melissa Jones. She does logos and business cards and flyers, labels, and more. You can find her on Instagram at It's Just Me by Melissa Jones. And then you can see some of her work and the things that she has been selling at It's Just Me by Melissa Jones.bigcartel.com. And so I've been able to share some folks from coast, because I believe Melissa is in Georgia. So, I believe Melissa is in Georgia. So there we go. I hope that you will take the time to seek out and support these business owners and all that they're doing. They're doing amazing work, and we need to make sure that we support small businesses. As I disclaim and declare on every episode that what we do is not there's no quid pro quo. Right? We're not doing this because we're getting something for it. No one's paying us for it. This is not paid advertising. We're doing this because This is our way of being able to support small business, period. It's invaluable. It's important that we support business of all sizes. So I want to give you guys an ending quote from Dwight D. Eisenhower, where it says, the supreme quality of leadership is unquestionable integrity. Without it, no real success is possible, no matter whether it is on a section gang, a football field, in an army, or in an office. Man, integrity. That's where it ends. And with that, I definitely hope that you guys take what I've shared today and that you make the most of it, that you apply it. If you have any questions about it, please email us at don'tcallitsmallbiz with a Z at gmail.com. Don't call it small biz with a Z at gmail.com. You can also go to foremanllc.com /podcast, and you'll see there's a feature there as well for you to be able to share that information. With that, be sure to check us out on Facebook at Foreman and Associates and on Instagram and Twitter at Foreman LLC. Our podcast Twitter handle is It Ain't Small, and our Instagram is Don't Call It Small. Be sure to also follow us and share us with your friends, colleagues, and family. You can follow me on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn at Natasha L. Foreman. Reach out to me, say hello, share your story. I look forward to meeting you. I want to make sure that I give proper credit for our show theme song. It's called Higher Up, and it's by Shane Ivers. Thank you for tuning in to the Don't Call It Small Business Podcast, for sharing these episodes with others, and for your continued support. And don't forget what I tell you on each and every episode. Don't call what you're planning, thinking, dreaming, or doing little or small. Go big, go bold, or go nowhere. I'll see you here next week. Make today a super awesome day. Take care.